Hello, I'm Jerry Crosby, and I'm here with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Chico Stake Life Sketches. And I'm very happy today to be introducing you to Terry and Mary Baggs. Terry Baggs is president of the Sacramento Temple here in California, and his wife Mary is the temple matron. And so it's wonderful to have you guys come all the way up here to Chico to talk to us and to share your insights and your life story with us. And so, as often happens, let's begin with when you were just little ones. Can you tell me a little bit about your childhood?
I'll go first. I was born in Washington, D.C. when my dad was assigned to the Pentagon. We lived there. We lived in Long Island. We lived in 2 different places in Chicago. We lived in Hawaii when it was announced to be a state. We lived in Japan. And then finally my dad retired in Albuquerque, New Mexico, after which we moved to the San Francisco Bay Area.
And this was all while you were still a child?
Well, when we moved to California, I was 16 years old.
Wow. So did that mean that you had to shift schools a lot?
I did. I went to 4 different schools during my 4 years of high school.
Wow. And did you struggle with making friends, or did that just teach you to be more extroverted and forthcoming in friendship?
I had friends, but when you move when you're in high school, that's tough. They've already got friends. But I had some very good friends my last 2 years. And that's how I joined the church, was through one of them.
Oh, wonderful. And was that here in California?
It was. It was in Mountain View, which is just north of San Jose.
And this was while you were in high school then?
Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about your friend and how they got you involved in the church?
Well, I actually hung around with a group that, as was common for the late 1960s in California. Some of them were involved in things that I never got involved with, and my one friend stood out because she didn't do that. We had an English class together. I asked her questions about some of the books that we were reading in terms of her church. She answered them, and then she said, "Why don't you talk to the missionaries?" And so she introduced me to the missionaries, and I was baptized about 5 months later after I first met with them.
That is a remarkable story. Mm-hmm. Did your family get involved at all, or were you baptized singly?
I was the only one baptized, but my parents were both there at the baptism.
Very nice. And President Baggs, how about you? What was your were you as adventurous as your wife?
I'm never as adventurous as my wife. Well, I was also in a military family. My dad was in the Air Force, but we did not have the moving experience that she had. And by moving, you know what I mean. And but I was born in a city that no longer exists, where my dad was serving at the time in the military in Weaver, South Dakota. And I was born there. And the fact that it doesn't exist anymore has nothing to do with the fact that I was born there, I assure you. But after we moved away, the base where my dad was, and we lived off base, in off-base housing, needed to expand. And so they took over the city of Weaver, so it's no longer there. But we'll never forget when my dad came home and said we were moving to California. And most kids, when they're told they're going to be moving, are not very happy. And I don't remember how we initially reacted, but then my dad said, "And because we're going to California, we can all go to Disneyland." Well, that was a smart move because we all cheered about the move now. So we came to California, and my dad had just a series of incidences that happened in his career where we never really moved again. I moved to Southern California, stayed there until he retired.
And what age were you when your family moved to Southern California?
I was 8.
8? Uh-huh. And what town did you guys end up in?
We ended up in Riverside near March Air Force Base.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So then that kind of brings us to, how did the two of you meet? If you're both in California at this point.
Right.
And were you raised in an LDS family, or were you also a convert?
Convert also, yeah. And so when we moved to Riverside, I had some friends that were members of the church that were, my age, very young. And in early elementary school, I had a friend who invited me to go to primary with him, and so his parents took us, and that was when primary was during the week, kind of dating myself a little bit. And so I went to primary, and as I got into the 3rd grade, I met a guy that we'll call Tom. We'll call him Tom because that was his name. And he and I became fast friends. And he was not a member of the church, but we were best friends all the way through elementary school, junior high, spent every day together during the summer. And then in high school, we started to date and stopped hanging around together quite so much. And then at the same time, we were not dating, so we got back together. And what I didn't know was in the meantime, he had met someone who had introduced him to the church, and he had been baptized. So he told me the whole story and gave me the Joseph Smith story and told me about his membership in the church. And I thought, well, that's really nice. I don't know if I'll do that, but that's really nice, Tom. And so then he said, well, we've played sports together in school. You want to play on the church softball team? So I thought that sounded like a good idea, so I did. And then something happened that oddly, you wouldn't think playing church softball, you'd have an experience that would lead you to feel so much like joining the church. But we had a really good team, and when it came time to the playoffs, back when the church had big tournaments and things, my coach came up to me during practice and said, well, you know how you're supposed to go to church 3 out of every 4 Sundays if you're a non-member to be able to play on the church team?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I would have liked to have said I didn't know it, but I did. And I thought it was pretty good. I didn't know I hadn't been doing it. And he said, well, the bishop says you can't play because you haven't been. So although there was some disappointment, I thought very much, wow, this church has standards, and they live them, and they expect you to live them. I was impressed with that. And so it had a favorable influence on me. So then eventually Tom, one day walking out of church, said, I don't want to assume you know more about the church than I should, and so why don't you meet with the missionaries? Kind of like your friend just saying, hey, why don't you get with the missionaries? So I did, and then I know after meeting with the missionaries and reading the Book of Mormon some, I eventually thought, I need to check this out for myself. The promise is there. I'll try it. And one night at bed, after reading some from the Book of Mormon, I got on my knees and prayed. And I know people have conversions all different ways. Some just have always known. Some have gradual experiences. Some have singular experiences. And that's what I had. I just at that moment, the Spirit told me this was all true. And any concerns I had just dissipated. So I got baptized. We had the weekend of the baptism. I had met this woman who was a good friend, not a good friend, she was an acquaintance. And I said, you want to come to my baptism? And she said,
I came.
Yep.
Oh, very nice.
So she was there, and I wanted to get baptized in Big Bear Lake up in the mountains there in Southern California, where we were having a young single adult conference that weekend. But I wanted my parents to go, and they weren't going to come up there. So we went back and had the baptism there with my parents there.
And so you're both in college at that point in time?
Yes.
Yes?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Very nice. So the Lord kind of came after you more than once. Then,
Yes.
If he had you in primary,
all that time, right.
and then in high school, and then
He had to
again
be
with
very
the
patient
missionaries.
with me. Yeah, I was the remedial convert. Yeah.
And so then you go to his baptism.
I go to his baptism. I knew him, and I was going to UC Riverside. He was going to the local junior college, and when the next year when he started there too, we just knew each other, and then we went out, and it wasn't real easy because he wanted to go on a mission, and girls just kind of get in the way, but
You were very supportive.
I was very supportive, and so he went on his mission, and I stayed home, and I even sent him money for his mission.
You were very supportive then, and so you waited for him for the 2 years?
Him, yes. Had a marvelous 2 years with friends. I had a great group of friends. We did everything together.
And were you still doing your studies then
By
at
the
Riverside?
time when he left, I had graduated, and I was a preschool teacher at that time.
Oh, so she was kind of ahead of you academically then.
She's ahead of me in a lot of ways, certainly academically. Don't watch us do Jeopardy together. She always wins.
I like that.
If I can add one thing, thinking of this, the woman, my friend in high school, actually wound up here in Paradise. And we have spoken in state conference twice up here. When I've mentioned her, it was Shannon Greer.
Oh, yes.
She was Shannon Pulley when I met her and was in high school with her. But I know she's no longer in Paradise, but she was the influence that helped me convert to the church. And I will always be grateful to her.
Oh, those kind of friendships are priceless. So you go on your mission, and you told me you went to France,
Right.
which has never really been a very easy mission, and I don't think would have been in the 70s. Is that when you went?
Yes, mid-70s.
And so what was your experience on your mission in France?
Well, I was very anxious to go on a mission. In fact, the odd thing is, even before I joined the church, I felt a real pull to go on a mission. I felt a strong desire to go, even before I was baptized. So while we were dating and we had some conversations about, should we get married or go on my mission or what? And we decided, since I didn't have my patriarchal blessing yet, we'd wait till I got that, which I was getting very soon, and that there might be some subtle hint in there about whether I should go or not. Well, the subtle hint was like more of a kabong over the head.
I was going to say, he's not subtle very often.
In the blessing, it says, "You will serve a full-time mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints." And then it spelled out some blessings. So I was pretty excited, and you were very supportive, and off I went. And you could say it was a hard mission. And there were some missionaries who would have pity parties about that. But I think overall, the French members were great, and the French people were great, and they loved you. And we knew that the most important convert from our mission would be ourselves. And we did have some success teaching and baptizing. So now that it's been however many years, it was fine.
Well, as long as you're proselyting for the Lord and you're doing His work, that's it.
Yeah.
Conversion is up to God and the people whose hearts He's touching.
It's true, but it does feel good when you see some success.
Yes, that is always nice to see the fruits of your labor.
Right.
And you said that you helped pay for his mission.
I sent him some money every month, and that was when you sent the money directly to the missionaries.
Yes.
And I did send him some every month, which made it really interesting because the French like to strike, and they had a postal strike while he was there, and the missionaries weren't getting their money. I think we actually wound up sending it to Salt Lake, and then they would have, when a missionary or somebody would travel there, they would take the money there with them, however much money needed to go to the missionaries or whatever else. It was kind of an interesting situation.
It was great for the missionaries that didn't like riding home.
Yeah.
And you were comfortable waiting. You said you had friends and you had your work, and you just knew that this was the course the two of you were plowing together.
That's right. I thought there's nobody I want to be with than him. So.
And she wrote mushy letters every 6 months.
We agreed every 6 months we could write a mushy letter. I did, but he didn't. So
no, missionaries shouldn't do that.
Oh, so that's interesting. So you did. You wrote him a mushy letter every 6 months?
Every 6 months.
Very nice. Mm-hmm. And I bet you kept those mushy letters.
I did. I blushed and then put them away.
So you come back from your mission, and I assume the two of you get married. Now, your families still were not members at that point in time.
Correct. But both were very supportive. My parents helped finance my mission. I think I made money on my mission. I had people sending me money. But, they were very supportive, but not members.
And how did you negotiate being married in the temple when you have non-member families?
It was a little more difficult.
I think that from the beginning of when I understood temple marriage, I made it clear to my parents that that's what I wanted to do, and they were supportive. I think it was hard on them. I remember my dad one time saying, "Don't talk about that in front of your mother." But they were supportive. My dad actually drove us to the LA temple, and they were there afterwards, and we got married.
That way I was able to get in a good nap.
Yes.
So,
and then you had a nice big reception afterwards with everyone?
Yeah.
And the nice thing at the reception was our parents got along very well, and at the reception, it was like they were doing a shtick or
our
something.
Dads,
they were having such a great time.
Very well.
The dads were, so it worked out very well.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That is a great story. And then you began your family. Can you tell us a little bit about your family?
Well, we have 5 children. Our first is David, and then Jesse. Those are both boys, and then Wes. Our only girl is Abigail, and then we have a Matthew also. And there's about 9 years between the 5 of them. We are very fortunate. They all live within half an hour of us, and one of them lives in our neighborhood. So when we're home and not at the temple, I take grandkids to school. So it's a very grounding experience, very nice and fun, and having them in the car. Lately I've been picking up the older ones, the older two in our neighborhood from seminary, so that's always an interesting experience at 6:30 in the morning or so, but it's fun. It's good to be with them.
And so not only are you serving in Sacramento, but your whole family is settled in the Sacramento area.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That must be wonderful. And do you guys have little family get-togethers on the regular and make sure that you guys stay sort of connected?
Yeah, we have family gatherings pretty regularly, holidays or other occasions, birthdays and things. And most of our kids, not all of our kids, they really get along pretty well. The grandkids get along well. Some of them have become like best friends and love getting together, so it's great.
Well, last year we had 6 in one high school. We had 2 seniors, 1 junior, and 3 freshmen. And they did manage to get a picture on the first day of school. This year we only have 4 there, and we still haven't convinced the oldest one he needs to take a picture with his cousins.
And what high school are they all going
El
to?
Camino in Sacramento.
Very nice. Yeah, that must be lovely for all those cousins to be that close to each other,
Yeah.
and that creates a strong family bond.
Mm-hmm.
Any great stories from when they were kids?
Well, so this one of the ones that she takes to school every day and picks up at seminary, and he's a senior in high school this year. When he was a little guy, he was telling his parents a story, our son and daughter-in-law, a story about, I can't even remember what he was talking about, but the story included something about me. But when he referred to me as a little guy, he didn't call me Grandpa. He referred to me as the boy Grandma. And so we weren't quite sure, I mean, I kind of understand. There's Grandma, and there's that guy that's always with Grandma. And then his younger sister, who she also picks up at seminary now, was at our house sometime after that. And she was walking all around the house and looking in all the rooms, and she came out and said, Grandma, do you have any kids? Because she didn't see any kids. So it made me wonder, who does she think we are anyway? But they understand now.
Well, that's good. I hope by the time they're juniors in high school, they got that family
They've got
tree
it down now. Yeah,
that is
so
excellent. What brought you guys to the Sacramento area from the Riverside and Southern California?
After we were married and we were there while he finished his graduate degree, we actually went to Arkansas for a year. And that was really wrenching. Our dad said maybe they could finance us if we stayed in California. But we moved there, and it was a wonderful experience. Even though I had lived all over and he'd been in France, we found out there was life outside of California. And that was kind of a shock. I remember at a ward outside, our meeting house was very small. It had a chapel and it had a cultural hall. And it was August. I was 8 months pregnant, and we were having a ward picnic, and one of the members had slaughtered his pig to make pork and beans. And I thought pork and beans was you open up the jar and there's that little bit of fat. I got a big chunk of pork on my plate, and it had 3 hog hairs on it, and I thought, I want to go home. But by the time we left, we really loved it, and we loved the people there. We were glad that we had that year there.
And while we were there, I was called to be on the High Council. And when we moved back, it was interesting because a new family moved in, and the brother was called as the new stake president, and his name is David Bednar. So that would have been interesting to be on the High Council while he was the stake president. But
That would be interesting.
Didn't get to have that experience.
And for those people who aren't members of the church, do you want to explain who David Bednar is?
He's one of our church leaders, a member of the Quorum of 12 Apostles, and an amazing man.
Yeah, a truly spiritual giant and intellectual giant.
Yeah.
Really, well, they all are. They really are all amazing men, our
Right.
apostles. It's wonderful to have that kind of leadership and to be able to follow them. That would have been fun to be with Brother Bednar. That would have been great.
I've never forgiven him, but I'm working on it. He could have come earlier.
And so you settled up here in Northern California, or are your parents still down in Southern California?
Mine are in the Bay Area still, and his are in Southern California.
But it sounds like you guys had a really tight-knit relationship with all of them and that you're staying quite close.
Oh, they loved being together, and we loved being with them. They were great.
That is great. Are you enjoying being grandparents? You've already said that you're driving everybody everywhere.
Oh yes, that just makes life, doesn't it? It's wonderful being a grandparent, and we are a real huggy family. And those little ones, our youngest one is 4, and to have him run up and give a big hug, but they all give hugs. But it's just really a fun experience. We're really grateful that we have them nearby.
And how many grandchildren do you guys have now?
17.
Oh, that's wonderful. And the oldest is a senior, or do you have one beyond
Our oldest
that?
2 just graduated from high school.
Very nice. And where are they going to go to school?
One has already left for San Jose State. She's in the aviation program. They're going to learn to become a pilot is her dream.
Her bishop has taken her up flying, and she wants to be a pilot.
Well, there's a pilot shortage right now.
Yeah,
it's a
that's
good
right.
choice.
Yeah.
It's a good choice.
And the other one leaves in a week or 2 for BYU, Idaho.
Very nice. And you said, President Baggs, that your family came from Newfoundland and you were able to visit there. What was that like for you to be able to go back to the family roots? And what did you find out about your family while you were there?
Well, it was amazing. My dad's family was the family, my ancestors on my dad's side were from Newfoundland. His parents were married and then immigrated to the Boston area in the United States. And then they started having kids. And so there's all kinds of Baggs and Baggs-related people up in Newfoundland. So at one point, my 2 sisters wanted to go and asked if I wanted to go. I said, yeah, duh, of course. So we were going to go. One sister backed out. The other had some issues that came up health-wise. And my other sister and her husband went, and so I went with them. And it was very amazing. The countryside is so different, and it's an odd little country, though. I mean, it used to be its own country, and now it's part of Canada. It's 4.5 hours difference in time zones. 4.5. Explain that one to me. And we had a cousin reunion while we were there, and that was a lot of fun. And did a lot of touring around. It was great. It was wonderful. And then we went to cemeteries, looked at grave sites, found names of people that we'd heard mentioned growing up, and so it was pretty amazing.
That's wonderful. And have you been able to do family history work for your side of the family?
Yes. And we had a similar trip that we took together. My grandparents, my mother's parents, both came from Scotland, independently of each other, although they knew each other. My grandmother came with her to be with her brother's sister and mother. And they went to Mexico. They were Scottish. They mined. And that's what they went down there to do. My grandmother was married at the time, but somewhere between immigrating from Scotland and a few years later, she met what the family story is. She met a childhood sweetheart. They were married in El Paso. And this was 1919. She was pregnant later in the year, and the doctor said to her, if you want these children to be American citizens, you need to get into the United States. So we always thought that where they went, Morenci, Arizona, was just across the border, but it's like 2 or 3 hours into Arizona, the largest wet open pit nickel mine or something in the world.
Is it copper?
Copper, something beautifully done. We went there and visited a couple of years ago, and it was just an amazing, it's a company town. It's all owned by the company that mines the material now. And, I could just kind of see my grandmother as a young woman pregnant with twins. And
with twins?
With twins. My mother was a twin. And after they were born, about when they were 6 months old, they moved to Santa Barbara, and that's where my mom was brought up. But yeah, we thought that was just amazing. That show that's on BYU, Relative Race. When we were there, I thought, I feel like I'm on Relative Race. I feel like I'm right here seeing where my family was and thinking about them. There's nothing left from when they were there. The company owns everything, the cable company, the grocery store, and so it was completely different from when they were there. But it was just marvelous to see that and to think of that little Scottish grandmother who stood about 4'8", with those twins.
Well, I like anyone with Scottish roots, obviously.
To
Yes.
add something to her story. So when we got there, we had been traveling, and we didn't have a fixed itinerary, so we didn't have a hotel reservation. So we got into town, and we did some things, and then we went to find a hotel, and there was not a single room available anywhere because they had booked up a big mining convention or something. Said, you're going to have to go back to the next town, which I can't remember how far away it was, but we thought, well, let's go to the temple while we're here, the President Kimball Temple.
Yeah, the Gila Valley Temple.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we went and did a session, and just by coincidence, Mary ran into, she was a snowflake, right?
Yes, she was a snow.
Snow or a flake?
Or a flake. She was one of them. And I said, what are you doing here and not up in Snowflake? And we hit up a conversation. I told her, she says, oh, my sister has a room a house that she's not there, and you can stay there. So we spent the night in this woman's sister's house, and it was just delightful.
She said there's a lot of food in the refrigerator.
Yeah, and it was
There
all.
was. Not so much when we left, but
Yeah,
So good. So you got some good kitchen rating.
yeah, it was fun. It was
That
fun.
is great. Now, you said your patriarchal blessing told you that you had to go on a mission, but that was not your only mission. You guys went as a couple to Nauvoo.
Yes.
And what was your mission like there in Nauvoo? Was it a proselyting mission?
temple mission.
It was a temple mission.
And it was life-changing. Wouldn't you agree?
I would. It was
It
life-changing.
was so amazing. I
was.
can't even really describe what it meant to us.
They, besides serving in the temple, the mission temple president said, don't go home without doing everything you want to do. And so we'd plot it out. And
He gave us a list of everything you could do.
The very last thing that we had like 2 weeks left, and Terry asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go to the Field of Dreams. So we went up to the Field of Dreams, and it was late October, early November, and I asked them, is there still corn? And they said, oh, yeah, it's dried.
And this is from the baseball movie.
Yes,
Field
from the
of Dreams.
baseball movie, and it looks just like in the movie. And we went into the cornfield and came out of the cornfield, and it was just really a fun time. But one of my favorite memories of there is they have the pageants there in Nauvoo, and in one of them, and this is probably a lasting thought that I've had, is Parley P. Pratt, one of the early church leaders, comes out and addresses the audience and talks for a minute, and he says, when you're here, we're here. And that's how it felt in Nauvoo, that they were there. They were there, and you could feel them. A couple of times we sat outside the red brick store which was Joseph Smith's job, but so much happened in there too, and you could sit there and look down to the mansion house where he lived, and I could just think of him walking from home up to his work.
And again, for any of our listeners who may not know church history, you want to explain a little bit about the fact that Nauvoo is a Mormon town and was designed by Joseph Smith?
Yes, Nauvoo is a Mormon town designed by Joseph Smith. When he first got there wasn't much there. Marshy ground.
A lot of swamp.
A lot of swamp. The members of the church built lean-tos. They put up tents, and then eventually they built red brick homes. And they told us at one time that wherever you could see a tree, at one point there had been a house there. And the members suffered persecution there after Joseph Smith was murdered, and they left. They were only there for about 6 years, and then they moved on and eventually to Utah. And it's the Midwest through and through. It's humid. We had thunderstorms, and we met just wonderful people there that we served with, and people who came through Nauvoo that we got to meet also.
Yeah, and the Nauvoo Temple has kind of its own story of resurrection.
Right. It was destroyed and then rebuilt. And it was an amazing thing to have that temple rebuilt and to build it just as close as they could as to how it looked originally. And they had architect plans and everything, so they were able to do that. I like to tell people that the experience was, truly it was amazing, but I don't think there'll be any blessings in heaven for us for having served that mission. And you'll get to heaven. I'll be down below somewhere trying to catch up, sneak up to where you are. But after this life, there are no blessings. We had so many blessings here. I don't think there'll be any left for up there. We went. We got to serve a mission. We got to serve a temple mission. It was the Nauvoo Temple. While we were there, we got to go to all those church history sites. There was all that entertainment, the pageants, and BYU singers and dancers and entertainers that would come through. One We had friends and people we knew that came out to either visit us or just came there happened to be when we were there. Our family came out and visited us, and we went to the sites. We got to come home. We got permission to come home one weekend for a granddaughter's baptism. I mean, you add all up together, there was really very little sacrifice on our part. It was just all a wonderful experience.
Yeah, one of my favorite phrases by Brother Brad Wilcox is that, we are saved by grace because we can't earn heaven. But he talks about how we should learn heaven. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you guys had a little piece of heaven there that you were learning how to
Yeah, we
enjoy.
saw a little bit of it there. Yes.
That's great. And then, really kind of your third mission, you're called to be the Sacramento president of the temple and matron of the temple. And how has that been?
It's been marvelous. It's marvelous to be in the temple that much and to be with both the workers who sacrifice a lot to be there, and then with our patrons, and to get to know many of them because they're there all the time. It's family. It's just a marvelous experience to be able to be there in the temple and experience that.
And how long have you guys been the temple president and matron?
About 2 years.
2 years?
Mm-hmm.
And you're part of the transition of moving some of your patrons, your constituency, over to the brand new Feather River Temple, which is in Yuba City. What role have you been able to play in that?
We've been saying goodbye to a lot of people. That's been our role. So we've had to gear up our temple for the loss of many workers and patrons. And I say loss, it's a wonderful thing that they're getting to do that. But we need to fill some voids, and so we're calling a lot of new temple workers, and can't do much to solicit new patrons, but it's been good. It's been going well, and we're very happy that there's such a beautiful temple in Yuba City, and we can't wait to go see it.
Yeah.
Have you been through it yet? I assume. No, not yet. You will like it.
Our
It is
family's
very
going
beautiful.
together, so we had to, one of our sons decided what date we were all going, so that's when we're going to go.
Oh, that's going to be a
Yeah,
wonderful
it
day
will
for
be.
everybody.
It will be a marvelous day. It will be a
That's
marvelous
great.
day.
So you were both at Riverside. Can you tell me a little bit about what degrees you were pursuing at that point in time?
I am an English major. I have a degree in English, mostly Victorian England English.
Me too.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm an
isn't it?
English major as
Yes,
well.
Yes, and it really benefits me more than anybody else. I've always edited all of our kids' papers and Terry's, and I can edit the life out of anything.
Yep. Yes, I saw that.
But professionally, while I was a stay-at-home mom, the last, before our oldest son went on his mission, I worked as a instructional aide at our elementary school. That was to help pay for his mission, and I did that until the second one went, the last one went, and so that was it. It had nothing to do with English language, English literature, or anything. It was just fun. It was good to be with the kids.
I was going to say, and I'm sure it was wonderful for them to have a teacher at home.
I hope they felt that way.
I was going to say, sometimes I go, please, no. And what did you pursue, President Baggs?
I made the mistake of thinking it'd be a wonderful idea to study something I enjoyed instead of something that would be practical.
Oh, yeah, that was my English major mistake. Yeah, I hear you.
Yep. So I studied history. I love history. But I minored in archival work. And so I started out at the University of Arkansas. My first job was working in their archives. And it was great. But and then we came back to Sacramento, and I worked in the state archives, or with a contract with the state archives. And soon realized there was just not going to be a wonderful career in this very limited field. And I needed to make sure I made enough money to support my family. So I ended up going into a more practical field of insurance underwriting. And I was a director of underwriting at a regional office for USAA, and retired from them. I worked for some other companies before that. But that all worked out well.
Oh, that's good. And you told me that I need to ask you about your star.
Thank you for remembering to ask me about my star. So when we served our mission in Nauvoo, this star you can find it just about everywhere. It's in stores for sale. You can get lapel pins, tie tacks, Our granddaughter bought some earrings when she was out there visiting. And we have one hanging in our front window, a little star chaser type thing. So, but the Nauvoo Temple has about 24, something like that, windows around the top of the temple that are just like this, a little bit bigger, but they're just the same color and shape. And so it's a reminder to me of the Nauvoo Temple.
That's wonderful. I have a sunstone. We should have had it over here on the
there you
counter.
go.
We
That
could
would have
had
been
the
good.
star and the sunstone from the temple.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people feel like the sunstone would really be what people hooked onto, but people love the windows, and that seems to just have been something that people could attach themselves to. And the man who did them in the contemporary temple had a store there, and he had one of the windows that he had made for the temple there in the store. So large size, but people love the windows and
It's
the
a
stone.
5-sided star, represents the Savior, and so it's just kind of a nice thing.
And that is a reproduction of what was in the original Nauvoo Temple as well.
Yes.
Right? Yep.
That's a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing.
Hey, Ben. Thanks for asking.
And we're kind of to the end of our time together. If you could leave any message with our viewers, what message would you want to leave from your life experience?
Well, I think we just need to love one another. And that's what the gospel is all about. I think that as we've served in the temple, that's the feeling that we've had. We served in the temple before we were president and matron, and the relationships that we have there, we cherish those. And it's not just relationships that we cherish, but you learn to feel for others how you should feel toward them, to accept their shortcomings, to love them for who they are, to be appreciative of them. Nothing else really matters. That's the important thing.
It's good. I think back to when Harold B. Lee was sustained as president of the church and prophet, seer, and revelator. And afterward, the solemn assembly where he was sustained, they had a little news conference, and they said, now that you're the president of the whole church worldwide, what's your message to the whole world? And he said 3 words: keep the commandments. And that's not my message, but something kind of similar in a way. We talked about David A. Bednar earlier, and he loves to talk about making and keeping covenants. And the Book of Mormon says, wickedness never was happiness, so the opposite must be true, that righteousness is happiness.
Yes.
So by making and keeping covenants, we can be a very happy people.
Well, you guys sound like Paul, since we're all studying Corinthians right now.
There you go.
And that's a good thing to be. Thank you so much for coming and for being a part of this
Thank you.
and making the long drive down to Chico. It has been wonderful to be with you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good to be here.